Coming to you from the Deep South, this is the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. High impact leadership is not reserved for leaders, and it has nothing to do with your position, title, or rank. However, it does have everything to do with your character. It's time to climb to the next level and beyond, personally and professionally. Now, let's start making it happen with your host, Mac Story.
If you want to make enemies, try to change something. Those are the words from Woodrow Wilson. He was right on target, too. So that's the opening quote today. If you want to make enemies, try to change something. So today we're going to continue on this 30-part series on my book, Blue Collar Leadership and Teamwork, 30 Traits of High Impact Players. Today we're on trait 6, be flexible. Be flexible. You see, when change happens, some people will thrive, some people will take a dive. It doesn't matter what the change is. Some people are going to thrive, some are going to take a dive. But if you want to be a high-impact team player, you need to learn how to be flexible. Things are going to change. Leadership is about change. Management is about making sure everything stays the same. Leadership is about change. See the difference? I'm going to ask you that question I always ask you. If you had a choice to be on a team or someone to be on your team, would you rather them be flexible or be rigid? The answer is obvious. You'd rather have people who are flexible, who you can work with, who don't go ballistic when something changes. And I'm going to talk about culture because everything that I talk about is related to culture. Culture improvement, culture change, right? That's what they call it, culture change, cultural transformation. You want to be flexible as a high-impact team player. When we talk about change, some people embrace it, but most people resist it. Change, I learned a long time ago, way before I ever read a book or anybody told me there was any books that I need to be reading. I figured this one out on my own. That when change happens, it is a prime opportunity to shine. Talked about the shiners and the whiners last time. I'm going to talk about them a little bit more today. Because you can imagine the people who are flexible, they shine. The people who are not so flexible, they want to maintain the status quo, and they don't shine. They whine. They don't embrace change. They resist change. So high impact players, they intentionally grow through change. In simple terms, they shine. That's what I've been talking to you about. If your organization's going through cultural transformation and you're a part of it, you're growing through change. You're shining. Those folks who are not engaged, who are resistant, well, they're whining. And they're not growing through change. They're just going through change. There's a big difference. It's all about your mindset. But if you got a growth mindset, you're going to grow through change. You're going to look for the opportunities. If you're a high impact person, you got a lot of trust, you'll be able to talk to the leaders. If you think it's the bad change, you'll have influence. If you've got a track record of being flexible, especially if you've got a track record of being flexible, and then all of a sudden you're rigid, your leaders are going to notice that. And if you're positive, if you're trustworthy, if you're all these traits that we're talking about here, and change happens, and you're not automatically embracing it, that's going to be a big red flag for the leader. They're going to want to hear your thoughts. They're going to either learn something or either you're going to learn something if you got a high impact leader and you're a high impact player. So high impact players intentionally grow through change. Again, simple terms, they shine. Truly exceptional players, who understand the value of being flexible when change happens, they choose to be positive when change happens. We talked about being positive last episode. But those other folks, they're not so positive. People who are not flexible, most of the time they're not positive either. They're negative. See how all these traits, they kind of go together for the good or for the bad, depends on which side of the fence you're on. But when change happens, average players tend to resist. In other words, they choose to be negative, like I've been saying. But low impact players, this is a different category altogether. And there's a lot of people fall into this category. Low impact players angrily go through change. In simple terms, they whine, right? Not only do they whine, but they mad. They angry. When organizations bring me in, and especially if they've never done this before, and I'm the first exposure to this stuff, I mean, people, they get pretty angry about what's going on because it's big change, right? Sometimes it's the formal authority leaders that are the angriest. They whine the most. The reason is they're managers of people. When somebody brings me in, they're being challenged to become leaders of people, and they're not flexible. They don't want to learn. They don't want to grow. They don't want to change their values. They don't want to change how they treat people. They don't want to change how they interact with people. They're not flexible. Before, the way they were is the way things were. And now there's a high impact leader saying that ain't good enough. We got to change it. We got to get better. And the people who are not flexible, man, they whine. They whine. My goodness. If you ever been a part of it, or if you're going through it now, you already know exactly what I'm telling you about. If you're new to this, I'm just trying to share with you what's coming. If you're a top level leader, if you were to be a CEO or a business owner and you listen to this podcast, you're thinking about implementing this, you need to do it. But you got to understand there's a lot of people not going to be flexible. But I got tons of content that'll help you, help them. But some of them, they're going to hurt you more than they're going to help you. And those people, you got to get them out of the picture. And maybe they'll leave. Like I said, maybe a lot of times it's better if they decide to get themselves out of the picture. But to go fast, you got to have flexible people. When change happens, if you want to go fast, you got to have flexible people. Those are high impact team players. That's why all these traits are so powerful. But there's a lot of learning that's underneath these traits. Like, for instance, on this one, if you want to be seen as a high impact game changer, choose to embrace, support, leverage, and even lead change if you're truly serious about climbing to the next level and beyond. That's what high impact team players do. They're game changers. They don't only embrace change, they support change, and they leverage change for their benefit, their team's benefit, their organization's benefit. And ultimately, these folks are the ones who are going to lead the change. They're what I call the tip of the spear. And a way a leader can help in this area, if people are struggling with change, they can help them develop a change mindset, a growth mindset. They may not have had it before. It's going to be painful. But that's one of the reasons Rhea wrote our book. Rhea and I wrote a book together called Change Happens, Leading Yourself and Others Through Change. It goes really great with the last trait, be positive, and it goes great with this trait, being flexible. That book's full of teaching to help you grow and develop your influence when change is happening in a way that helps you to be positive and be flexible because you want to, because you understand what we teach you in that book helps you understand what's happening when you either don't or either when you do embrace change. Pretty powerful. But also, I've already released I think it's a 15-part series on my podcast. It starts at episode 211, if you haven't heard that, or if you don't have the book. But again, I teach you a lot of stuff. I've got, I don't know how many hundreds of hours of podcast. But I still highly recommend you get the books if you're interested in any of this stuff, because it's a tool. You need to be able to reference it quickly, flip it, open a page, show it to somebody. If you're a high impact leader, you got to have these tools. You got to have them accessible. You got to be able to show them to somebody. Read a quote. Even if you know the quote, open the book and read the quote so they'll see that it come from a book, and maybe they'll get interested in the book. But at a minimum, go check out the podcast series at 211 if you struggle in that area, or if you have people who struggle in that area. And the stuff I'm talking to you about now, that's why we do our special offer, where at the moment, if someone purchases 300 books, we come speak up to 2 hours. Actually, we reduce our speaking fee to $5,400, which is the cost of the 300 books. Give you the books for free, and we come pay our expenses to speak anywhere in the U.S. for up to 2 hours. What we're trying to do is help leaders do what I'm doing on the podcast. But I want to come in and motivate and inspire people to want to get into the books. I want to motivate and inspire leaders to want to lead book studies, which we call a book study is one form of a BCL session. BCL stands for Building Character-Based Leaders. There's so many organizations where the people are not flexible, and the leaders just hope they'll deal with change in a good way instead of helping them deal with change in a good way. So we wrote that book and a lot of our other books. The Change Happened book will help you understand about your influence, either increasing or decreasing relative to change. But it's a lot of our other books going to help you develop the character to be able to do what we're teaching you in that book. But some people, they just need an awareness, and they've already got the character, and they can move forward once they understand how they can leverage change to their benefit. Some people, we're all over the place. When I say that, I mean we're in different levels of learning and growth. Some people have worked on the character, but they still got a problem with flexibility and change. Those folks, when they go through the Change Happens book, most of those people, they're going to move forward, and they're not going to have a problem with change anymore. I had someone leading a book study recently on that book, Change Happens, and I heard from the plant manager how this person who used to be on their team had lots of problems with being flexible, like we're talking about today. When change happened, they were resistant. And after they went through the book study, actually, they were not even done with the book study. They were just, a quarter of the way or half of the way into the book. And the plant manager was telling me how they had some change, during that time pop up, and he was expecting that person to be resistant because that person was always resistant, but they were not. Just from going through some book study chapters as a group. And again, if you don't know how to do that and facilitate a book study, I taught you in episode 305. Go check it out. But that's what that leader was doing, taking his team through a book study, and that person was participating in it. And he said, man, I wish I'd have took this team through that book study years and years ago. My life would be a whole lot better. I'm here to tell you, if you're a leader and you have people who are resistant to change, you got to help them understand how it's hurting them. Most people do not want to hurt themselves career-wise, professionally. A lot of times, though, they think everyone else is wrong. They don't understand they're wrong. So you got to do what I say that we always are doing. Rhea and I are always provoking thought and raising awareness. If you're a high-impact leader, you need to do the same thing. You got to slow down to go fast. But when it comes to your success, don't focus on becoming more successful. Focus on becoming more valuable. One way you can become more valuable is to be flexible. Don't be the thorn in everybody's side, especially your boss's side. Your boss may be rolling out a change, and they may not like the change either, but it's coming from their boss or their boss's boss. Or guess what? It could be coming from the customer. The customer might have wanted to change. So who would have a bright idea of saying to the customer who wants a change, No, we ain't gonna change. You gotta keep dealing with it the way we're giving it to you. I tell you what, they won't be a customer for much longer. But if you went through my book, Blue Collar Leadership Leading from the Front Lines, you also know that I tell you your boss is your customer. And I say they're your number one customer because they control a lot of your destiny. They control your pay, your time off, your promotions. They control a whole lot about your life if you've got a boss. They're your number one customer. And imagine this. Imagine you're the boss of someone else. And you may be, or you may not have ever been a boss of someone else, but you can imagine it. If you're the boss and you're rolling out a change to your team, would you prefer them to be flexible or to be resistant and rigid? Another one of those easy questions, right? You already know the answer. You'd rather them be flexible. But when change happens in your organization, which one are you? And when you look out the window at all the other people in your organization, how are they dealing with change? You might say, oh, there's a lot of them out there struggling, Mac. I already know they are. Most of them, they're not getting any development. No one's provoked the right thought. No one has raised their level of awareness. They're hanging out with a lot of people like them who don't know what they don't know. So until a high impact leader shows up, starts teaching them some stuff, starts modeling some stuff, the good stuff, leadership development content based on timeless, tested principles, they ain't ever gonna know what they don't know. The root cause of all these problems is always top leaders, upper level leaders, mid-level leaders, frontline leaders. Those four groups are the biggest obstacle. Actually, those four groups are usually the least flexible when it comes to the stuff I'm talking about. The higher up you go, the more they think they already know what they don't know. Kind of crazy, but that's the way it works. So if you're a part of what I'm talking about and teaching, if you're valuing this, you're sharing this stuff, you're trying to get it implemented where you work, you're trying to share it with your children or your spouse, I truly appreciate you. We on the same team. That's why I take my time to do this for free. Someone reached out to me recently, wanting to help me monetize my podcast. And I said in a nice way, I don't want to monetize my podcast. I'm not doing what I'm doing at this very moment to make money. If I was, I'd be monetizing my podcast. But someone asked me if, they wanted to help me. They want to do me a favor. But I don't want it. I got a button right here where I record it on Spotify. It says monetize your podcast. All I have to do is click it and start doing it. You'd start hearing ads, and you may one day, they may make me do it, but I don't want to do it. Right now, it's an option. So far, I've been doing it for 5 years, and I ain't ever had to monetize it. I want to keep it free because I ain't trying to make money with my podcast. I'm trying to help people. And I tell people all the time, I ain't trying to make a lot of money. I'm trying to make a lot of difference. So if I ain't trying to make a lot of money, why do I have to monetize my podcast? I don't want to. But I probably lose a lot of visibility because if I was monetizing my podcast, Spotify would get the majority of the money somebody would be paying. I'd get a small percentage, and then they'd be putting my podcast out, making it visible, a lot more visible. So right now, I ain't got to monetize. I don't want to. If you want to help me, tell people about this podcast. It doesn't cost them anything. Help me spread the word. Share it, links to it on your social media. But those who help move the team and the organization forward are the most valuable players on the team. Back to the lesson on being flexible. Not some of the time. Are they the most valuable? All of the time. Because leadership is about change. So those who are helping leaders implement change, if you want to get better, guess what? Something's got to change. If you want your life to be better, you better be flexible, because something's got to change. Doesn't matter if it's at home or at work. You got to be flexible. You might have to move halfway across the country to get the job of your dreams, or the income of your dreams, or live in a location of your dreams. It may be all the way across the country. You may have to move to a different country. You got to be flexible for that to happen. All kind of things at work. Every day things are happening where being flexible will increase your influence with the right people. It doesn't mean you got to be flexible when something is totally wrong or goes 100% against your principles. But if you got a high impact leader, again, they wouldn't expect you to be flexible. They'd expect you to stand firm and to open your mouth and give them some feedback and help them understand what maybe they missed. But most of the time, people need to be flexible. But they're resistant. And it's killing them professionally. And often it kills them personally, at home, with their personal relationships. But when change happens, high impact players lead the way. They are flexible, they're engaged, and looking for ways to make things happen. And I'll tell you this, because I've had the privilege of being in all type levels of meetings when I've been back in the old days when I used to be a lean manufacturing consultant. I was on the shop floor, and I was in the office with the top leader on site, and everywhere in between. I was all over the place all the time because I was responsible for getting results. So I was all up in the middle of everything. And so I got to hear lots of meetings, lots of discussions, lots of private conversations. And one of them was related to this principle I'm teaching you now about being flexible. Because I was there leading change. I was facilitating change. That's why I was being paid to be there, was to help them get better. And so I was implementing a lot of change fast. I needed flexible people. I needed flexible teams. And I would have different people on my teams from week to week. Always somebody different, always a different project, always a different mission, always different personalities, different character, different values. Every week, a whole new mix of people. 6 to 10 people most often. But a lot of times there'd be somebody would get put on a team. Maybe it was even a good employee that had good track record. And sometimes it was the operator. But most of the time the operators were all right with it. A lot of times the person who was not flexible was a person in management at some level, or a support person. Someone like in engineering, or a lot of times the engineers, they think they know it all and they got to make every decision, and they're the smartest one in the room and nobody else has any meaningful input. Not all engineers are like that, but I've met a whole lot of them like that. They're not flexible. The team's trying to be flexible, but one person may not be flexible. But I'm going to tell you what, in these meetings that I was engaged in, those people lost a lot of influence with their leaders. Those people may have been on the radar to be given an opportunity in the future, and it never happened. And it never happened because they were not willing to be flexible. Sometimes they may have had the right idea. Whoever it was, may not have been an engineer in the story I'm about to tell you. Whoever it was, their idea may have been fine. But it needed to be a team idea, not their idea. I needed the whole team to buy in. So if the team was not bought into their idea, even though it was a good idea, that was not the idea we were going to go with. We were going to synergize as a team. Everybody together decides the best course of action, and that's what we were going to do. Because my responsibility was to engage the entire team, not to engage one person who's going to turn off the whole rest of the team. And I was responsible for that. And I knew how to deal with that. But I'm teaching you the lesson because the person who wasn't willing to be flexible and not be a team player, see, I wasn't willing to be flexible either, but there was a difference. That person wasn't willing to be flexible for themselves. They was all worried about themselves and their idea. I wasn't willing to be flexible because I was focused on the team and the team's idea. See how all this stuff matters? Because I'm saying be flexible, and I'm talking about the person who would not be flexible, and I'm talking about I wouldn't be flexible. Which one's right? It depends. The story I'm telling you, I was right because I was leading a team of people. It was not me against the team. That other person, it was them against the team. There's always so many variables. We could have been dealing with something, even as a team. That person could have been the expert. They could have been right, and they could have been standing strong and not willing to be flexible, and they could have been right. And if that was the case, my job is to lead the team to help them understand this one individual is right and we're all wrong. So again, I'm trying to lead the team. So then I got to lead these other people who are against that one person to help lead the conversation to get buy-in from the team to that person's idea. And a lot of times the team may not be bought into that person's idea just because they don't like the person, because they're never flexible. Maybe they're never positive. They're never a lot of things. Maybe they got bad character. But I got to help the team see what's the right thing for us to do. And if that person's right, they're being rigid. I'm being flexible. I'm willing to go with them. The team as a whole is not being flexible. I got to be the leader. And if I've done enough work on me, I'm going to be able to lead that team to buy into that person's idea, if it's the right idea. And during that process, something could happen. Some research could happen. Somebody could say something. And then we realize that person was not right. So then that person now has got to come with a team. Lots of it's all about flexibility. But you got to do what's right when it's right. Because it's right. Not because of your name or your title or any of that stuff. Because we're trying to do the right thing to accomplish the mission for ourselves and for the organization. And I'm going to tell you what, I miss all those days of leading those teams. When I go into these companies and I get to meet people and I see them leading transformation and I get to hear their stories, I'm going to tell you what, I'm jealous. A lot of them hate that they're going through it, but I always loved it. I still love it. And I tell you what, I love having to deal with the negative people. The people who are opposite of everything that I talk to you about. I love dealing with those folks as a leader. Most of them, I can help them get better. Most of them, I could turn them. Most of them quickly. Not because I'm special, but I know how to provoke thought. And I know how to raise awareness. And I'm loaded up with content. And I can drop the right principle on them and tell them the right story. And I can keep my attitude right. I can be positive and flexible and all these things that a high impact player is. I got to be able to do that. And a lot of times I can move those people. People who a lot of people can't move. And it's because they're not qualified to move them. Doesn't mean not because they're the boss. A lot of times they're the boss and they still can't move people. They end up having to fire them or either they run them off. And a lot of times it's because that leader is not qualified. I've walked up to so many people who I already know when I get there, they're bad mouthing me because somebody's already told me. I walk up and talk to them for 5-10 minutes and we fine. We ain't got no problems. That's because of the way that I dealt with them. I was being flexible. But I was fully loaded with some content. And every now and then I run into people. We just don't mix, and that's fine too. But I love engaging with the people who are resistant. Because most of the time, those people have the most opportunity to be helped. And I love helping people. If they're resistant to the good stuff, they need to learn some stuff because it's holding them back in life. So I'm going to leave you with a closing quote today from Stephen R. Covey, author of The 7 Habits, my favorite book of all time. Make your head hurt, but it's got some good principles in it. He says this: live out of your imagination, not your history. In other words, be flexible. Talk to you next time.
Make it happen or someone else will. It might as well be you. Are you serious about taking your career and your life to the next level and beyond? Check out Mac Story's Blue Collar Leadership series books and others, now available on audio, along with paperback and ebooks at Amazon, iTunes, and Audible. Please visit bluecollarleadership.com to learn about Mac's books, programs, special offers, certifications, and more. Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast.